Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Beat writer Orion Sang joins us this week to discuss the huge win on Saturday over Sparty and much more. First, a few of my thoughts to get us started. When Isaiah Livers suffered his groin injury in December, we all figured it would take time to get him back. You just never know with those muscle strain injuries. I thought we would be just fine if he was out for a few games. Well, he was out for more than a few games, and that's when we hit our rough patch. I've always liked Isaiah. He has an inside-outside game, handles the ball well, hits his free throws, and he plays solid D. Not a great defensive player, but solid. The other thing he does exceptionally well is lead. Not that Xavier Simpson isn't a leader, but Isaiah is different. The team seems to follow his lead. He's much more emotional. We missed that for 8 games when he was out. When he came back for the Illini game, you could tell immediately he felt better, and then he tweaked the injury. I really wasn't expecting him to play Saturday, but Juwan said he was a game-time decision, and out he trotted to start the game. What was apparent early against Sparty is how much better we are with him on the floor, even if Tom Izzo doesn't want to admit it. Hopefully, the injury is healed, he doesn't tweak it again, and we have him the rest of the way, because he is the difference maker for us, and we missed that for 8 games. My guest today says we are in good shape when it comes to being in the mix for a return to the big dance. Joining us next is beat writer Orion Sang from the Detroit Free Press, here on the Michigan Man, in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew. So stay with us. Back with us on our Game Day segment this week to talk about a great weekend for Michigan basketball is beat writer Orion Sang from the Detroit Free Press. Once again, great to have you with us, Orion.
Good to be back.
Well, Saturday's game against Michigan State wasn't a must-win, as we all know, but it was huge nonetheless, wasn't it?
It felt as close to a must-win as you can get. Obviously, when there's so many games left, you never really want to say, well, you have to win this game or you need to win this game. But when you look at where Michigan was entering Saturday, it really kind of did feel that way. Obviously, there was 13-9, 4-7 in the Big Ten. If they had lost, it would have been 4-8. And they have 4 of their last 6 Big Ten games are going to take place on the road. They have 8 total Big Ten games left. So the ending schedule is pretty difficult. You're looking at it, and it would have been hard to find a way to get to 9-11, 10-10 in conference play had they lost Saturday. Slightly more doable now. And then obviously, Michigan State, as it stands, it's the second best win on Michigan's resume, so that's a pretty big deal. Michigan has 6 quad 1 wins. I believe that is 6th best. Mm-hmm. They're one of 10 teams right now with 6 or more quad 1 wins. So they're up there. There's not that many teams that have more quad 1 wins than Michigan does, and they added another on Saturday.
Well, and one player can make a difference on a team. We have talked about that for the last 2 months, missing Isaiah Livers, but he did put a real jump into the step of that Michigan team Saturday, didn't he?
Yeah, agreed. I guess when you're talking about Livers' game, it's honestly that he's a top shooter, right? He's more of a master at a bunch of different little things, like he just knows where to be on offense and defense. He's experienced. He's versatile. He's not he's not the type of defender Charles Matthews was, but he's a pretty good team defender in that he knows where to be at all times. You saw him have that chase down block on Aaron Henry, so his athleticism makes an impact on both ends. And obviously he spaces the floor. He's a 50% 3-point shooter, so that's a huge deal. And the other big thing about it is that Brandon Johnson's been playing really well recently, but now you're bringing him off the bench. And your rotation, it becomes tighter because now you have an 8-man rotation. You have Livers starting, and your 3 bench players are John, David Julius, and Austin Davis. So it really, Livers coming back affects everything about this team, and you saw that Saturday.
No, absolutely. And I know we needed his offense back. His defense helps. But, when you watch the flow of the game, he's also a leader on the floor. He's giving directions. He's talking all the time. And, that communication thing is something that Juwan Howard's been talking about
the last couple of weeks. You might not notice that as much, but that is big too, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Livers, in his time off, he spoke about how he was trying to be like another coach, and almost like a player coach. He had watched film with the coaches. He even would give advice to his teammates from the bench. So I think you're starting to see some of that take place even more on the court. Before he went out, obviously he was one of the team's most experienced players, and he was, already a veteran and helping out his teammates. And now even more so, he's doing that just because he had a new perspective during his time out with the injury.
Another interesting thing was before the game, Juwan was mentioning that Isaiah's his minutes would be limited when he came back, but he played 18 minutes in the first half and spent a lot of time out there in the second half. He doesn't look right now like there are any lingering effects to that injury, does it?
Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't think he would have a limit, to be honest, either, because I guess when you look back at the Illinois game, that was his first game back from a pretty serious injury, and he was on track to play like 35-plus minutes that game before he went out. So I guess when they do bring him back, it's with that full go label, like he's close to 100%, and they're not going to have him on a restriction. So I think we can say that safely based on what we've seen in his return back both times from injury.
Well, Saturday, Cassius Winston, who has absolutely killed Michigan the last 3 years, you sort of wait for those final 3 minutes in a game to see him take over. But Saturday, Juwan and his staff, I think mainly Sadi Washington is what Juwan said, played him differently, a different strategy. And those adjustments seemed to really, work and throw him off a bit, didn't they?
They did, yeah. So in the first game, Michigan mostly played drop coverage, which has been, their primary ball screen coverage. You have the guy, the on-ball defender, going over the screen. You have the big dropping back into paint to defend against the drive. And it works, It encourages the opposing ball handler, the guard, to take a long two, right, inside the three-point line, or a runner/floater, something difficult with the big contesting. So that usually generates inefficient shots. And it's one of the reasons why Michigan is one of the top 3 or 5 teams in limiting three-point attempts, limiting three-point volume, which is a big deal because, if the less three-pointers your opponent takes, the less they're going to make naturally. So, but Saturday, obviously, Michigan changed up a lot. They went back to the hedge, and people are going to say that's familiar because Michigan hedged the previous 2 years under Luke Yaklich and John Beeline. So Michigan's players know how to do it, obviously, and they put that plan into full effect Saturday against Cassius. I think it worked really well. You had some Michigan State fans saying, like, oh, he still got 20 points. Yeah, but it took him 18 shots to get it. He was 5 of 18. He scored 5 of his points, which is a quarter of his total points in garbage time when they were fouling and extending the game, even though it was beyond reach. I think that was a good strategy. And credit goes to Sadi Washington, obviously, for he had scout, which is what Juwan said. He had a scout this game where he looked at Michigan State and sort of helped put together the game plan, so he gets credit. And obviously Michigan's players get credit for executing, too. It wasn't just the 2 guys involved in the pick and roll. It wasn't just Eli Brooks, who was guarding Cassius, and it wasn't just John Teskey. It was the rest of the team. Because when you hedge, the other team has a 4-on-3 for a brief period of time before the big can get back to his man. So you've got to play good defense. You've got to rotate. You got to make sure you're guarding down low and guarding the shooters. And it was just a good overall team performance from Michigan. So, it's what you want. When you're looking at a game, you're looking at a guy like Cassius trying to figure out a way to stop him when very few teams have. You develop a game plan that you think will give you the best shot. You put it in during practice. You have your players work on it. And then to see it executed during the game, I'm guessing that gave Michigan's coaches some warm feelings inside.
Well, it can be dangerous to say one game tips the scales during a season for a team or gets them over the hump, so to speak. But, you beat your rival. You beat Michigan State at home late in the year. The psychological benefits of that can be immense, can't they?
Yeah, I think Michigan just needed to win one at home, honestly.
Yeah.
They had lost their 3 previous home games. They lost Penn State. They were just outplayed that entire game at Penn State. Like it didn't even feel that close. It didn't feel like Michigan was at any point was ever going to really win that game. But then Illinois and Ohio State obviously were super tight, super closely contested. It went down to the wire, and Michigan just couldn't gut out either win, despite being in the lead late. Michigan had to lead late in both of those games. Obviously had a great chance to win them, but just didn't pull it out. So you look at those 3 games and you're thinking, well, Michigan State's coming to town. They lose this one. That's 4 straight home losses. That'd be pretty devastating, given how important it is to protect your home court in Big Ten play this year. So
yeah.
they got the job done.
Well, Orion, Isaiah's back and he's healthy, so we all agree, and we saw it on Saturday. Makes a big difference, but it's going to take more than that down the stretch to peak. Who else and what else needs to happen if this Michigan team is going to step up and become dangerous as we head into March?
I wrote about it heading into the Michigan State game, and I've written about it before, but really it's the three-point shooting. Right now they're shooting 30.4% in conference play, which is 11th in Big Ten play. And 11th is right around where they sit in the conference standings. So, I mean, you just think that maybe like if they improve the shooting a little bit, things might go their way. Like if they had shot the ball better against Ohio State, Illinois, some of those really close games, they might have got it out a win. So that's the thing I'd look to. Now they have Livers back in the lineup, maybe that will help. Because right now they're shooting 51.4% on twos. That's number one in the Big Ten. They're doing well in other facets of offense besides shooting. But this is a team, people know by now, this is a team that relies heavily on jump shots. The offense is predicated on finding open guys, and they have to shoot. Everyone has a green light. Says Jawan. So if they can increase the three-point shooting, then I think you would see pretty tangible benefits for the offense and the team as a whole.
With us on our Game Day segment this week is beat writer Orion Sang from the Detroit Free Press. Orion, Wednesday up to Evanston to play a Northwestern team that is not very good to say the least, but it is on the road. And I don't know if it's a must-win, but we really do need a W there, don't we?
Yeah, it's one of two games, maybe even three, I would argue, left on the schedule that Michigan can't really afford to lose. And there's not that much to be gained from winning these games either, but, you just can't really lose them. So the two I would say are Northwestern this week, and then they host Nebraska later in the season. And then the third I would argue is Indiana at home this Sunday. These are all just games that you really have to win at this point in the season. You're favored. You have home court advantage in two of the games, and there's going to be a lot of Michigan fans at a Northwestern game too Wednesday. So, but yeah, like Northwestern, they're not that great. They haven't had a great season, but like all Big Ten teams, they can scare you. They were leading Rutgers big yesterday at Rutgers. They blew that. They also had a huge lead against Maryland at home. They blew that too. So they're capable of playing good basketball for stretches. If you're Michigan, the last thing you want to do is get out to like a double-digit deficit on the road. So I'm curious to see how Wednesday's game starts.
To me, it's a big win or a big game. We've got to get the W there because you come back this weekend, you have Indiana making a visit to Chrysler, and they are no slouch, are they?
They're not. Their season, I think, is going the wrong direction. They had a really easy schedule. The first half of conference play, and they kind of struggled basically no matter who they were playing. They won more than their fair share of games, obviously, during that stretch, but it didn't look good. And now that their schedule is toughening up, they're really struggling. They lost badly at home, to Purdue, and that was, the day that they brought back Bobby Knight, the program legend.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere was insane. It was charged up, and they lose. They're trailing like double digits against Purdue at home, and Purdue isn't that great this season. So I just think Indiana, I didn't think they were that good when the record was, gaudy and nice and shiny, and I think that some of that shine is starting to wear off now. So for Michigan, they'll be favored in both of these games. If it wins both, conference records back to 500, and it basically comes down to holding serve. You can't lose to Northwestern. That'd be a quad 3 loss. And if you lose to Indiana at home, that'd be a quad 2 loss. So you just kind of just find a way to win these two games if you're Michigan.
Well, talking about that Indiana game for just a moment on Saturday, for those of us of Bobby Knight's generation who saw him coach, been 20 years, which is so hard to believe. I know he left on bad terms. He was fired, and he was always in the news at Indiana for all of the years he was there. But it really was good to see him come back, be honored. And he actually looked like he enjoyed it, didn't he?
Yeah, he has such a complicated legacy.
Oh, yeah.
Just in terms of how things ended. When you got a guy like that who's so closely intertwined with the history of your program, it feels weird when you don't reconcile for such a long period of time. So for Indiana basketball, it's probably a good thing that they were able to bring it back. I saw this clip where Dick Vitale was trying to give him a hug. And Bobby sort of recoiled and, was being very physically aggressive with Dick. So I was like, well, that kind of seems like what I might have expected from this. But it's a good thing for that program that they were able to, smooth things over with them and bring it back. It would have felt weird if they hadn't been able to.
No, absolutely. It was time. So that was it was good to see. He is what he is, though, at this point, not going to change much. But getting back to Michigan hoops, The Xavier Simpson suspension story has been, front and center the last week and a half, I suppose. In your opinion, could the university have handled this a little bit better?
I go back and forth. They could have maybe said when it happened, they could have said, oh yeah, he was suspended for breaking curfew. But then again, like from their point of view, they don't think that what he did was a big deal. They just think that he was driving a friend's car. There's a lot of talk about the optics of driving, a car licensed to the wife of the athletic director. But from Michigan's point of view, it's just, it's Evan Manuel's car. He drives it. Obviously, he's a teenager. He's a kid, college kid, so he's not going to be able to afford, buying his own car. So it's his car, and he let his friends drive it, And the argument was made to me like, hey, like, when you're a kid growing up, when you got your first car, you likely didn't own it, right? It was given to you by your parents. And yeah, there are times where you probably let your friends drive it too. So from their point of view, they don't think it's a big deal. Obviously, some of the details about the case, how he lied to the police, that's a no-no. And obviously they talked to him about it, and that's not something you want him to do. But they think that the overall situation, slippery road or whatever the report said, and borrowing his friend's car, they don't think that's a big deal.
No, it doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, it happens. You want to correct the situation, and I know I've read stories that Michigan reported it or talked to the NCAA about it. Is this the kind of thing that the NCAA is going to eventually do something about? Is it just not a story anymore?
I don't know what they could do about it, I didn't think it was a violation. We'll see. I didn't think that it was like something that Michigan should be like, oh, we're worried about, and I don't think they are worried about it either. So we'll see though. Things will always change. It's the NCAA. It's unpredictable.
Well, here we are as we enter the week. Then Orion, 14-10 on the season. We, as we've been talking about, we have to start stacking more wins. Not going to be easy as of right now, though. Orion, when you look at the overall after this weekend's action, how many wins are you still thinking Michigan needs to make it into the Big Dance?
I was thinking about that yesterday, and that's a really hard question because you never really know. I guess we can try to map it out. So they're 14-9 right now. They have, I believe, 8 regular season games left, and then guaranteed at least one game in the Big Ten tournament. So we can look at the regular season. The difficulty about this closing stretch is that they have 4 more opportunities at quad 1 wins. It's all 4 are on the road. Yeah. As you know, Michigan they're 1-5 on the road. They don't have a quad 1 victory on the road yet. It's hard, but you look at. Let's start with the so-called gimme games. Obviously, they're expected to beat Northwestern. So let's say they beat Northwestern, and then Indiana at home. They should probably win that game too. And then Nebraska at home is the penultimate game in the regular season. Those are 3 games you pretty much have to win. So that puts them at 17 wins. And then, the other 5 games at Rutgers, at Purdue, Wisconsin at home, at Ohio State, and at Maryland. If you can win 2 of those 5 games, I think you're in pretty good shape. That would put you at 19 at the end of the regular season. And I think they'd be 19-12 heading into the Big Ten tournament. I think that'd be more than enough. You'd be sitting on 7 quad 1 wins at that point, which is a lot, for a team that's 19-12. Pretty good strength schedule. And then obviously they'd be, I think, 10-10 in conference play. I think that'd be enough to get it done. You could even argue that 18-13 would be enough to get it done in the regular season. So that would entail finishing 4-4. I think that would probably be enough. But if you want to be safe, 19-12 is probably the way to finish. And really, you see how crazy the Big Ten is. Things could go any number of ways. Like, I don't see Purdue, Rutgers, and Ohio State as infallible at home. I just don't. I think you can beat those teams. It's going to be really hard, obviously, especially given how Michigan's played on the road. But, that now they have Isaiah Livers back, maybe to hit a few more threes away from Chrysler Center than they have been. So we'll see. Those 3 games are chances to win, quad 1 games. And then Maryland, I think, is the toughest game left on the schedule. Maryland's going to win the Big Ten, I think, and they're going to be very hard to beat at home. But really, if you're Michigan, you kind of have this opportunity to play the spoiler role. Like the past couple weeks, Michigan has been at home, right? And there's pressure on you to win at home. The players know it. They've talked about it. They've talked about how hard it is to win away from home. Now that they're back at home, they feel the pressure to win and hold serve. And now you're heading on the road to play some of these teams. And, I guess the pressure is maybe more on the home team in those situations. If you're Michigan, you're saying like, hey, let's play our game and see what happens. I just, that's my take on it. Maybe they don't approach it the same way, but if you're Michigan, you're just trying to sneak one of those road games left.
Well, during Saturday's game, the Fox crew was still saying the Big Ten could see 12 teams in the tournament. That seems like a little too much for me. I think 10 is, more like it might happen. But your thoughts on that 10 or 12 teams, what do you think?
Well, we can rule out Nebraska, Northwestern. Yeah. Indiana, I mean, they're plummeting in the net rankings. I looked it up yesterday, and they dropped like 11 or 12 spots.
Yeah.
And their end of season schedule is just brutal. I don't think they're going to make it, to be honest. Wisconsin, I mean, they have a lot of big wins. They have 6 quad one wins. I think they might have 7. I'm not sure. But man, like their non-conference schedule is such a slog, and they have some bad losses in there. I just don't know if they're going to do it. It wouldn't surprise me. Like they might. I think they're probably going to finish above 500 in conference play, and they'll be like 18 or 13 or 19 or 12. So it wouldn't surprise me if they made it. And then the other one is Purdue and Minnesota. Minnesota probably isn't going to make it at this point, but Purdue is right there. Purdue has had a crazy Big Ten season with a bunch of huge wins. So I mean, it'll be interesting to follow. It all depends on really it depends on how highly the committee values the Big Ten, because these teams are just beating each other up. There's only one team that's really sort of rising above it all, and that's Maryland. Everyone else is just trading punches and rolling around in the mud with each other right now. So we'll see.
Well, final question for you, Orion, before we let you get out of here. Juwan Howard question. And, when we go back to the beginning of the season, I think all of us were wondering what kind of coach was Juwan going to be? He had great assistants around him, but we didn't know. Here we are in February. At this point, is this about what you thought we'd get from Juwan Howard as a head coach?
It's a good question. I honestly didn't know what we would get from him as a head coach. But if you're just looking at it through the lens of, the past 8 or 9 months since when he took the job in May, mm-hmm. I think the early returns are positive. His first stamp was establishing himself as a top-notch recruiter. I don't think it gets said often enough, but when he took this job, he's starting from behind with the 2020 class. Recruiting is so accelerated these days. These kids already have, years-long relationships with other coaches. They've been recruited for such a long time. They know other programs. They have familiarity. And then you have Juwan, who's coming from the NBA, probably midway or 75% through the recruiting cycle. And he put together a top 5 class. I think that's a big deal, being able to show that, he has the recruiting chops to pitch, top kids. He has a vision to have a recruiting board and establish who his top targets are and pursue them and land some of them, And obviously recruiting is a huge deal, for college basketball. So that's the first positive sign, I think, from his tenure. The other would be, I think, how he is coached on the court. At times, there are minor quibbles that people might have with his rotations, but obviously he was hamstrung by Isaiah Livers' injury for a long period of time. And then, maybe there's some other in-game decisions that people aren't fans of. But for the most part, I think he's established himself as a pretty good coach. It's hard to debate with their strategy on either end. The offense, I think, looks pretty crisp. It's running well. It's working, and they get a lot of good shots. They get a lot of good shots after timeouts and crucial scenarios. He dialed up that end-of-game play to Eli Brooks against Ohio State. Kind of a clean look. So I think offensively, he's proven he's a pretty good coach. Defensively, they were getting torn up by opposing big men in Big Ten play. They just sort of adjusted, and now that's not happening so much anymore. And then you look at the way they defend ball screens. It's hard to argue with the methodology behind it. You look at the statistics. They're one of the best teams in limiting three-point shots, and that's a big deal. Usually that's going to help you win some basketball games. So, yeah, and you look at, obviously the last thing would be you look at the relationships that he has with his players. I think he's stepped in and established himself as a mentor to all these guys. So it's hard to say that the early returns have been anything but positive, just based on what we've seen so far. Obviously, it's early in his tenure, so we'll learn more about him as we go along. But I think the program's in a decent spot, as good of a spot as you can be in, when your all-time winningest coach leaves in May. So that's my take on it. With
us on our game day segment this week has been beat writer Orion Sang from the Detroit Free Press. A lot of basketball yet to be played in the Big Ten. Of course, as we've been talking about, a big week for Michigan this week with Northwestern on the road Wednesday, and then back with Indiana on the weekend. So, Orion, always a pleasure having you on the show, and I'm sure before it's all over, we'll have you back on again.
Yep, I'll talk to you soon, Mike.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew.
On Quick Hits today, women's basketball got 20-point games from the sophomore duo of Amy Dilk and Naz Hillman, and never trailed in a 77-52 win over Minnesota Monday night at Williams Arena. The win marked Michigan's third straight, as the Wolverines led by as many as 25 points. Dilk had 22 points, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds, while Hillman posted 21 points, 8 boards, and 5 assists. Senior Akinra Johnson added 12 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists, as 7 Wolverines found the scoring column. U of M will be back in action on Thursday, hosting Northwestern at 7 p.m. We are 16-7 overall, 7-5 in Big Ten play. Another strong offensive performance from hockey resulted in a 5-3 victory over Wisconsin on Saturday night at Yost. The win earned the Wolverines a sweep of the visiting Badgers. Defenseman Jack Summers had a goal and an assist, his first 2-point outing of the season. 5 different Wolverines scored goals in the game. Strauss-Mann stopped 39 shots and ranks 5th in the nation in save percentage at .932. Michigan will head to East Lansing for a showdown against Michigan State on Friday at Munn Ice Arena. Puck drop is scheduled for 6 p.m., and the game will be broadcast live on BTN. Then on Monday, both teams are back at it in Detroit at the LCA. Puck drop is at 7 p.m., and will be broadcast on Fox Sports. We are 12-12-3 overall, 8-8-2 in Big Ten action. Number 17 ranked softball capped a perfect opening weekend with its second straight extra inning decision, using an RBI single to walk off against Fresno State 1-0 in the 9th inning on Sunday morning at USF Softball Stadium in the Wilson D. Marini Classic. Alex Duraco and Megan Bobian combined for a 2-hit shutout. Bobian won in relief with 4 strikeouts and just 1 hit and 1 walk allowed over 3 innings. 5-0 Michigan will return to the road this weekend, heading to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for the annual ACC Big Ten Challenge. The Wolverines will play 2 games apiece against Louisville and host North Carolina. Kicking off the weekend on Friday with a 1:30 p.m. game against the Cardinals at the Tar Heels Anderson Stadium. Baseball gets things started on Friday in Scottsdale at the MLB4 Collegiate Tournament. On Friday, it's a rematch of the College World Series against number 2 Vandy, followed by a nightcap with Cal Poly. On Saturday, it's number 9 Arizona State. And on Sunday, we wrap up the first weekend of play against UConn. So it is great to have softball and baseball back, and both teams should be very, very good this year. It should be a very exciting spring. That will do it for this week. Make sure you tell your family and friends about the show, and join us again next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!